One of the things I find most fascinating, both because of its mystery and its universal nature across all peoples and all eras, is without a doubt death. We see lives being lost, reported online or in newspapers all around the world. But the big question is, what's next? To add a bit more mystery to the subject, I decided to make this Iceberg video with different theories about what might happen on the other side. I don't need to explain how these kinds of videos work, but in short, the top of the iceberg covers lighter topics, and as we go down layer by layer, things get stranger and more unsettling. So grab a snack, your dinner, or maybe even your lunch, and let's dive in. One, the end of your soul through forgetting. The end of the soul through forgetting is an idea that shows up in some philosophical traditions, modern esoteric teachings, and existential speculations. It's very different from the classic beliefs in heaven, hell, or reincarnation. The theory says that the soul doesn't just disappear suddenly. It gradually fades away until there's nothing left of it. This process would be like a gradual loss of memory and consciousness. When someone dies, their soul goes through a transition. Eventually, all memories, experiences, and traces of personality fade away. The final result is a silent extinction, not as punishment, but through total forgetting. Why is this idea so unsettling? Because it's the opposite of immortality. There's no punishment or reward or cycle of rebirth, no spiritual eternity. There's only an inevitable erasure, like a computer shutting down with no chance of ever restarting. Whether the case is real or not, well, remains a mystery. Reincarnation. Reincarnation is the belief that after death, a person's soul or essence is born again in another body. This new body could be human, animal, or even spiritual, depending on the tradition. Life would then be a kind of continuous cycle: birth, death, and rebirth. It's certainly one of the most well-known beliefs and has countless followers. Of course, its details differ depending on the religion or philosophy. It's also an ancient belief, with written fragments dating back to ancient Egypt. There are many reports of possible reincarnations, such as the case of James Leininger, a boy who suffered from intense nightmares about plane crashes and even mentioned specific details from World War II. Whether the case is real or not remains a mystery. Heaven and hell. This is probably the most well-known belief around the world. It doesn't need much explanation. If you're a faithful Christian, live a good life, and practice good deeds, you'll be rewarded with a place in heaven when you're with God. Some religious interpretations say that before someone goes to heaven, their soul goes into a deep sleep. But the most accepted version is based on Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27, which says that it is appointed for people to die once, and after that comes judgment. And in that judgment, it's decided whether the soul will spend eternity in heaven or in hell. This topic is extensive because it involves many interpretations. Some branches of Christian theology claim that hell, for example, isn't eternal but temporary, a divine punishment that eventually ends, after which the condemned soul ceases to exist forever. The Christian version might sound lighter, until you imagine that if it's true, those who have been in hell for 2,000 years are only at the very beginning of their suffering. In fact, the word beginning doesn't even fit here since we're talking about a punishment with no end. In other words, if the eternity of the soul is real, then any person who has ever died will exist for longer than the entire age of the universe multiplied by infinity. The question is, where will that soul be? In heaven with God or in the hell of torment? But in the deeper layers, we'll come back to this topic. Return to the cosmic origin. The return to the cosmic origin is one of the oldest and most mystical ideas about what happens after death. This theory claims that consciousness, or the vital essence, doesn't follow an individual destiny, but instead returns to the original source of everything, a kind of cosmic ocean of energy or universal spirit. It's like a drop of water that, after falling into a river, eventually makes its way back to the sea. You don't disappear, but you stop being a separate self. Your identity dissolves into the whole. Interestingly, this idea lines up somewhat with modern physics. Thinkers like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff use metaphors from thermodynamics or quantum physics, suggesting that the energy of consciousness isn't lost, but instead returns to a greater field from which it emerged. The quantum information of consciousness, rather than being destroyed, disperses throughout the universe, possibly being recycled in another body or place. Just to be clear, I use the example of thinkers within physics, but this hypothesis has no scientific basis, especially since it can't be tested, much less proven. It's merely a curiosity, but it has its adherents. Nothing. You die, and that's it. It doesn't get more straightforward than that. This is a pretty common view in materialist and naturalist schools of thought. They see consciousness as just something the physical brain produces. In my opinion, it's the dullest of all the theories, but atheists can chill because there's a better idea that I'll be talking about in the next part of this discussion. I can't help but mention David Earle's short film Dining Room or There Is Nothing. Check it out if you can.
Nietam si red. There is nothing.
Honestly, sharing my personal view here, this is the one that makes the least sense to me, already disproved by the very existence of consciousness itself. I'm not saying there's necessarily a heaven or hell. What I mean is, if consciousness came from somewhere, then it has to exist in some form after death. It might sound like a logical leap, but it really isn't. I'll break this down in the next topics and maybe in a future video focused only on this question of consciousness after death. To me, death isn't the end for a logical reason, not because of faith. Believing there's simply nothing is just the stubborn conclusion of someone stuck in the mindset they formed as a teenager. The spiritualist perspective claims that the soul survives and can communicate with the living through mediums, messages, and apparitions. Of course, this isn't the only possible interpretation within that belief system. Often explored in horror movies with the famous Ouija boards, communication between the dead and the living is far from a new idea. Back in the 19th century, movements in Europe and the United States held seances and table-turning rituals in an attempt to contact people from beyond. And if you open the Bible, you can even find practices of a similar nature, such as the case of King Saul, who consulted a medium to communicate with the prophet Samuel. The Judgment of Osiris. The Judgment of Osiris comes from ancient Egypt. It was the process through which a person's soul was evaluated after death to determine its fate in the afterlife. The heart of the deceased was placed on a scale against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was as light as the feather, showing that the person had lived with justice and balance, the soul could move on to the Duat, the world of the dead, and achieve eternal peace. If the heart was heavy with guilt or evil, it was devoured by the goddess Ammit, a creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. In that case, the soul ceased to exist. The Judgment of Osiris was different from the binary concept of heaven and hell because it had a single, definitive outcome. Either the soul moved on to peace, or it was destroyed. It was essentially a form of second death. There's no such thing as eternal hell, just the total destruction of the soul. Afterlife as learning. This theory says that death isn't the end, but the start of a never-ending process of consciousness evolution. Human life is just one stage of learning. When someone dies, their soul goes to a kind of spiritual school. There, it looks back on its past actions, choices, and experiences. The goal is to refine consciousness, correct mistakes, and better understand the lessons of existence. Some philosophical traditions see the afterlife as a laboratory of consciousness, where decisions, emotions, and behavior patterns are examined. The ultimate purpose is to prepare the soul for higher levels of existence or enlightenment. A school without summer vacation, though, already sounds like eternal suffering to me. 9. Eternal return. I mentioned that atheists would be better represented. The eternal return is the idea that life, the universe, and existence don't have a linear end, but instead repeat infinitely in identical or almost identical cycles. Every death and birth would simply be another stage of an endless cycle. Everything you've lived would be experienced again and again, forever. Consciousness might be aware of this repetition, or might be forced to relive every choice, every suffering, and every joy for eternity. Nietzsche popularized the modern concept of eternal return as an existential hypothesis. Living the same life repeatedly is a test of self-love and courage. I'm not sure how positive this would be for people who have suffered greatly. From another perspective, the idea of eternal return doesn't seem appealing at all. Consciousness would have no escape, while free will would be completely denied, since everyone would be predetermined to live in an eternal cycle. Purgatory. After death, not all souls go straight to heaven. Some still have marks of imperfection of minor sins left unresolved. For them, there's purgatory, which is like a temporary state of purification where each flaw is confronted and transformed. In Catholicism, purgatory is understood as a temporary state of purification for souls who died in friendship with God but still carried penalties or imperfections due to venial sins. It's not forever like hell. Every soul that goes through purgatory will eventually make it to heaven. The suffering there is seen as purifying, getting rid of everything that keeps the soul from fully thinking about God. The Catholic Church says that the prayers of the living, masses and indulgences can help the souls in purgatory. It's seen as a kind of divine mercy, making sure justice is served without anyone being condemned for eternity. Catholic theology also says that in purgatory, time is experienced differently. Every moment is deep and meaningful, giving you time to think about your life and what you've done. When purification is complete, the soul ascends, finally free from the imperfections that once separated it from the full vision of God. This entire explanation is just a very simple summary of Catholic theology's understanding of purgatory. The true explanation is quite extensive and complex. Just making this clear out of respect for Catholics who may be watching the video now. Layer 3. Things get really weird from here, with conclusions that are far from friendly and deeply unsettling. But I bet that's why you ended up here. Let's get started. Predestined for hell. This is one of the most bizarre ideas I've seen. You'll see why. In Calvinist theology, God is absolutely sovereign, and salvation doesn't depend on human deeds or choices, but solely on divine will. According to this theology, some souls are chosen for eternal salvation. If there are souls predestined by God to be saved, then there are also those who were condemned even before they were born. Hell, therefore, isn't just the result of sins or lack of repentance. It's a predetermined, eternal, and inescapable destiny. It doesn't matter if you were a good person, prayed, or helped others. If you're not one of the elect, you're going straight to hell, and it's not a place of temporary punishment. It's permanent. It's predestined, and there's no turning back. Picture this. You get there and realize there's nothing you can do to change the situation. It's like everything you do in life feels pointless because your destiny was set before you even came into this world. No mercy, no forgiveness, no heaven. It's just what God has decided. And hell isn't just fire and darkness like in cartoons. It's a place where you feel every regret, every fear, and every failure from your life, as if it's happening again. But the worst part is knowing you can do nothing to save yourself. Your consciousness realizes you never had a choice. You might think I'm making this up, but predestination is a core part of Calvinist theology, which bases its interpretation on Romans chapters 8 and 9, where the Apostle Paul cites examples of divine predestination. Of course, there's room for many different interpretations. This doctrine opposes the conditional election of Arminianism, which believes that God's choice for salvation is based on his foreknowledge of who will respond to him with faith. Unconditional election is linked to the doctrine of total depravity, which states that man, because of sin, is unable to seek or initiate a relationship with God on his own. Unconditional election is part of what's called the 5 points of Calvinism, which basically guides the theology of that Protestant branch. Stating my opinion, this is one of the most controversial interpretations in all of Christian theology, and I totally disagree with it because it makes God a practically sadistic and evil being. But the big question is, if this is true, could God really be considered a good being? To me, no. Endless dream. Imagine dying, and instead of going to heaven or hell, your consciousness falls into a dream that never ends. At first, it feels calm. It's all so real, like the colors, sounds, and emotions. But eventually, you realize you'll never wake up. Time becomes meaningless. It feels like forever. Dream cycles repeat endlessly. Every experience, every memory mixes with worlds you've never lived. You create and destroy universes inside your own mind, but there's no escape and no ending. It's like being trapped in an infinite game you don't control, where everything you feel is real, but everything is also an illusion. There's no progress, no purpose, just your thoughts going around in circles. You can try to change something, but you always end up back where you started, and every start feels just like the one before. It's strange, claustrophobic, and weird, because you feel like you're stuck with yourself forever. And the worst part is that no one can wake you up. No external force, no divine or human intervention. You are alone with your own consciousness, creating dreams that never end, living in eternity that feels both real and false at the same time. It's interesting how this interpretation connects to the mystery of dreams. Dreaming is still considered a mystery in science, even after decades of research in neuroscience, psychology, and even artificial intelligence. There's still no clear consensus on why we dream, or what the exact purpose of dreams really is. It's a little strange that something so common to us is still so unexplained. Maybe that's why so many people interpret death as nothing more than a deep sleep. Final simulation. The final simulation theory is an extreme version of the simulation hypothesis popularized by Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom in 2003. Here, death is neither an end nor a spiritual passage. It's simply the moment when the machine, sustaining your life, shuts down the program. According to this view, consciousness doesn't belong to the biological body, but to a mind outside the simulation. When we die, we don't wake up in heaven, nor in nothingness. We just log out of a game we never knew we were playing. The bizarre part is that some versions suggest we don't wake up in a larger world, but in another simulation, a layer above, in a cycle that may never end. The so-called final simulation would be one from which there is no escape, a prison of successive realities, where death only restarts the experience under new rules. This idea has become increasingly popular in recent years, and millions of people actually believe in it, based on the hypothesis that the universe is a kind of hologram. In a way, this reinforces the belief that the universe was created by a higher force, a God, though without the nature or essence of the Christian God, for example. Eternal nightmare. Some researchers and theorists suggest that death may involve states of consciousness similar to the effects of DMT, the psychedelic molecule produced by the brain at the moment of death. In this state, consciousness can enter surreal and distorted realities with intense perceptions of light, shadow, and bizarre shapes. For some people, these experiences can be so traumatic and chaotic that they become eternal nightmares with no conscious escape. Unlike a normal dream, the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not, which makes the experience pretty distressing. The theory suggests this is a transitional phase of death, The strangest part is that although everything seems random and chaotic, there is its own incomprehensible logic, as if another consciousness is playing with you, shaping fear in unimaginable ways. There is no rest, no end, only consciousness existing in a reality of continuous horror with no escape. It is the ultimate nightmare. You live, but every moment is torture and confusion, and you know it will never end. The idea of the eternal nightmare linked to DMT is not an official scientific theory, but comes from speculative interpretations of near-death experiences and the effects of DMT on the brain. Reincarnation in worlds of pain. Some esoteric traditions and theories suggest that death isn't the end. Instead, the soul might end up in a world designed for suffering where pain is constant, and the rules of reality seem distorted to make the torment even worse. In these worlds, pain isn't just physical. Every thought, memory, and regret from your past life shows up as living torment. You realize you're not alone, but there's no one to help you. You might see creatures, distorted figures, or shadows in the space, and they might react to your emotions, or just act weirdly, like they're observing you and testing you or something. The worst part is the repetition. When you think something is over, death just moves you to a new body, a new situation, and a new form of suffering. It's like every rebirth is a new version of the same bad dream. Unlike traditional reincarnation, which involves learning and growth in these worlds, the purpose is punishment or purging of unresolved trauma. Pain can be physical, emotional, or spiritual, depending on the type of world and the condition of the soul. Some esoteric or mystical traditions describe lower planes or dimensions of torment similar to hell, but with variations of time, space, and perception. In the end, death is not liberation. It is merely the doorway to a cycle that never ends, where consciousness experiences pain and despair in ways that surpass anything you ever knew in life. Infinite conscious death. This is definitely one of the most unsettling ideas, and it's no accident that I put it in the last layer. Imagine dying. Your heart stops, you can't breathe, and your body feels super heavy. Usually that would be the end of the story. But in this theory, it isn't. Your mind keeps going stuck in that last moment. You feel the suffocation, the pain, the pressure in your chest. Your mind waits for the blackout, but it never comes. Seconds stretch like centuries, and the collapse of the body becomes an eternal state. It's just this constant feeling of dying without ever actually dying. You're just a consciousness floating in the experience of your own end forever. The weirdest part is that there's nothing outside to distract you. No voices, images, or passages. You're stuck inside your own collapsing body. It's the most claustrophobic idea of all. Not being alive, but also never being able to die. Implicit in this theory is that during the body's decomposition, consciousness would feel every worm and larva devouring the flesh. This idea really took off on Reddit and other forums. That's how the terms eternal conscious death or infinite conscious dying started spreading more often as creepypasta, existential theory, or philosophical speculation. There have been some accounts of people who felt themselves dying while still conscious. Online communities have interpreted these accounts as evidence that the death process may be longer and more perceptible than we imagine. The distortion came about when it was suggested that this might never end. Whether it's real or not, honestly, I don't want to find out anytime soon. Predatory dimensions. The idea of predatory dimensions is that beyond the neutral places of the afterlife, there exist spheres or planes whose function is to feed on newly disconnected consciousnesses. In these versions, death isn't just a transition, it's a risk. When a person dies, their soul can become vulnerable and be captured or devoured by entities that feed on energy, memory, or vital essence. It's a mixture of 3 lines of thought. As mentioned earlier, Egyptian mythology is also a factor. Some occult stuff talks about astral predators that hang out in places with a lot of emotional energy, like hospitals or cemeteries, and they're basically feeding on human energy. Modern cosmological fiction also has influence. Horror authors and conspiracy theorists have imagined entire planes where gigantic entities recycle consciousnesses as food. The devouring can take different forms. Sometimes memories are ripped away, leaving a conscious body that doesn't recognize its own history. Sometimes the energy is drained until only an empty shell remains. Other times, the entity enters and controls, using your voice to attract more prey. There is no mercy, only an ancient appetite. It's a bizarre and primal vision, but a powerful one. Death may only be the beginning of another hunger. And if you think this is an exaggeration, remember that many cultures created amulets, prayers, and secret names precisely to keep something like this away. Perhaps not literally, but because they understood the fear every living being carries. The fear of disappearing and being devoured by something that hides behind memory. Imprisonment in objects. This idea suggests that after death, consciousness, or the soul, doesn't detach, but becomes trapped inside inanimate objects. Consciousness can inhabit ordinary things: mirrors, dolls, furniture, coins, or any object with emotional or symbolic value. There are a few possibilities as to why someone might be imprisoned. It could be an accident, the result of magic, a curse, residual energy, or trauma related to life. The trapped soul can't rest, but it can still be aware and observe the world without being able to interact normally. This version explores psychological horror because death brings no liberation. It's an eternity trapped in something never meant to live. You see people passing by, hearing, living their lives, and you realize that no one knows you exist. Every change around you is silent torture. You want to scream, but no sound comes out because you are just an object. The weirdest part is that you don't age, tire, or sleep. You're just stuck there, while the world keeps on going, totally ignoring you. Depending on the object, you might become part of rituals, superstitions, or other people's memories that are never acknowledged. It's strange, unsettling, and a bit claustrophobic. Death brought no rest. It brought eternal consciousness, powerless observing, and feeling everything without ever participating. It's sort of like being alive, but completely dead at the same time. No one knows the answer to this question. What comes next? But, in my opinion, there's definitely something there.